Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Carl Tart.
I'm Jackie's Neal.
And I'm Edgar Mobley's here.
And we are the host of a new show called Culture Kings on How Stuff Works. We cover a whole range of topics on this show, but one of the things that we talk about the most is sports because we love them. Jackie, what's the sports opinion you have?
The Cubs are the best team of all time.
That's ridiculous. Edgar?
Kevin Durant is the greatest player of all time.
Nonsense. My favorite basketball player is LeBron James. He's the king of the world, and we'll get into that on Culture Kings. Download it wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere. Just listen to it, damn it!
And now, The Low Post.
Welcome to The Low Post podcast, where it's Tuesday. We're doing another podcast because we're going to bounce around from series to series as much as I can. And I wanted to bring on everyone's favorite guest, ESPN's Kevin Arnovitz, because you are tracking the series that for some tracking, I mean in person, you're there at every game. The one I'm having the hardest time getting into, which is weird because you know I have a soft spot for the city of Toronto. It's a 1-8 series that is tied at 2. It's been frisky because the Wizards are just team frisky all the time, and feisty, and Marcin Gortat got a haircut. I thought Scott Brooks is calling it an age-appropriate haircut. It was an underrated coaching quip. But I can't, for some reason, I'm not excited. So Kevin, you're in Toronto, beautiful Toronto. I hope everyone there is okay. Obviously, what happened yesterday is terrible. Toronto is one of the greatest cities in the world. Can you get me into this? Excite me somehow.
By the way, ditto your comments on Toronto, a city I've absolutely fallen in love with. And yesterday was terrible. And the city's responding, so that's cool. There are a lot of interesting little subplots and a lot of questions I'm sort of having going into Game 5. And, you know, and there are a couple, and they're strategic in nature, which is kind of cool. I'm less interested in, here they go again, the Raptors. I mean, this is a basketball series, and I think it's going to be kind of decided by basketball. The first is DeMar DeRozan. And I think so much of the Raptors' progress this year in their well-chronicled evolution offensively is very much an expression of DeRozan growing up and his willingness to sort of modify his game for a revised offense that demanded it. And so it's been great to see. And when Washington came out with a lot of pressure in the first 2 games, he responded great. Did not have a statistically great first game, but the team played beautifully, and it was very much his willingness to sort of move off, controlling the ball and finding opportunities for others. But so we know this about DeMar DeRozan. Like, he knows how to hit tough shots. I mean, I think the question coming out of Game 4 and going forward is, does he know how to create easy ones? Because that's what it's going to take. I was really disappointed in Game 4. I just thought it was sort of, all of us who have nagging doubts about DeRozan, not because he isn't, he's a wonderful player, great guy, but there's always been a kind of inherent inefficiency to his game. He's more of a shot maker. I ran the numbers of the 176 guys this year or season that had 700 or more field goal attempts. He was 176. He was 175th in shot quality.
I read that. All your recaps of the games, by the way, everybody, whatever hours after Toronto Washington games are over, everybody should be reading your recaps. They're filled with nuggets like this. That one, the severity of it surprised me.
Right. I mean, hey, like a lot of guys, he really likes CJ McCollum. I mean, there are a lot of great players on that list. I mean, there are just guys who are just natural shot makers, and that stat is the average NBA player taking that shot. And DeMar DeRozan's not your average NBA player. He's much better than that. But I think that's going to be a crucial thing. And it was kind of ironic because the scout on Toronto, as we all know, is, hey, make the ball find their big men. Get it out of Lowry's hands to DeRozan's hands. That's exactly what Washington executed in Game 1, and they got absolutely torched for it. And we saw everybody get in the mix. But now they've eased some of that pressure, and I think partly because, you know what? Maybe DeMar DeRozan freelancing at 18 feet is not the worst outcome if we're defending the Toronto Raptors in the half court. And they were right. So I think that is sort of the thing I'll be watching. The other one will be, and Dwayne Casey's such an interesting coach. He is a small C conservative in all matters half-court defense, right? Like this is a man who wakes up and goes to the film room and says, what do I need to do today to keep my defense out of rotations? Like, we're not going to do it. We're not going to overload. We're certainly not going to blitz or trap. That's not what we do. We have the physicality and length to defend the floor. We will defend every pick and roll with 2 guys, and even tagging. Like, do it very, very sparingly. Like, only when you're going to get absolutely annihilated
By tagging, just to clarify for people who may not know, you mean when a guy guarding the shooter on the weak side comes in and bumps the big man rolling to the rim just to get in his way, and then you tag him, you literally tag him, and then you go back to your guy and hope that you get there before he can shoot, basically.
Exactly. So we're doing this now. We're actually we're providing the glossary. This is good. Thank you for doing that.
I think there's some percentage of listeners who may not know that term. So I just trying to be help. Yeah. Just trying to help.
Yes, I'm with you. I don't do it enough. That's why I'm legitimately thanking you. So that therein lies Dwayne Casey, and it's funny because in the first few games of the series, like Wall's numbers in the pick and roll were pretty devastating, even when he wasn't shooting well. I mean, they were just getting good stuff out of it. I mean, I think every sixth half-court possession is a John Wall, Marcin Gortat pick and roll, and they were getting like 1.3 points per possessions, and they were beating up the Raptors. It was pretty hard, even if the Raptors scored a lot of points themselves. And I think what's going to be interesting is if Wall continues to get confidence going downhill in this series, what are they willing to do? If Beal, who's actually not a great pick and roll player, it was very funny because I think Game 4, they clearly been trying to run stuff for him, and they ran him out of a couple early pick and rolls, terrible misses, and then like, wait, let's get back to doing Bradley Beal kind of things. And they ran some dribble handoff stuff with Otto Porter on the left side, boom, 3-point make. He was sort of a second side action on a play, boom, another make, and he's just been incredibly efficient. And sort of what do the Raptors do about this? What do they do in this series if the guards take over? Do they still stay true to sort of a much more conservative defense, which has been very effective for them all season long? I mean, they're a top 5 defense. They have a lot of strength. So that's interesting to me. Let me tell you what else is really fun, Zach.
Yes.
Pascal Siakam as the primary defender on John Wall.
That was awesome. That was
awesome.
Loved it. And they hid Miles on the other big man to cross match everybody. So, look, I thought it worked okay. There were a couple of times where you could see that it wasn't switching is something he does a lot, but switching most often I think ends with an isolation where he can hang fine. You could tell he was a little bit out of his element being like the first primary on-ball defender in a pick and roll. A couple times he got a little mashed and fell a little too, but that dude is, I said it on a podcast a couple weeks ago and I was up there, if he ever learns to shoot at all, like if he gets an okay 3-pointer, I think he could be really, really good. I even said I think he could make an all-star team.
He's going to be a starter in this league, especially given where the league is going, I think, for a good while. And I'm with you. And I think the shot has, I think it's a shot that is continued. It will improve. I mean, I think it's got, the integrity of the shot is there. I think it'll do that. So that's really fun. Zach, you have to love a series where there's like a 6'10" guy out on John Wall.
Awesome.
And the first, it was awesome. So, I think there's some really interesting strategic questions going in, and those are some of them into games 5, 6, and 7. And if you're one driven by narrative, obviously the Toronto thing, and there'll be so much tension in the building tomorrow. Is it tomorrow night? These games, they're playing every 7th day.
There's a game night, and then there's some non-game nights, and then there's a game night. Whatever night it is,
right.
It's yeah. As someone once told me, the sphincters will be tightening up in Toronto for Game 5. That Raptors only know how to do it the hard way, man. There is no gentleman's sweep in the Raptors DNA. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So the most substantive strategic shift happened sometime maybe in the second half of Game 2 or more concretely at the beginning of Game 3 when the Wizards started switching more and just said, we're certainly not going to trap DeMar DeRozan. Now they'll defend Lowry and DeRozan differently on the pick and roll because Lowry's a much better shooter, but we're not going to trap DeRozan. We're not going to blitz DeRozan and just give you the dump off to Valanciunas, who by the way is finishing damn everything around the rim.
Yes.
And sometimes we'll go under. And sometimes we'll just switch, particularly when we have Morris at center or even Mike Scott at center. Mike Scott has been a sneaky little X factor in this series. And I didn't think those guys would be able to stay in front of DeMar as well as they have, particularly Scott. And it surprised me how well they've held up. And the ripple effects of that have been not just DeMar taking a lot of mid-range shots, but the Raptors took, I think, 65 threes in the first 2 games and 46 in games 3 and 4 combined, and the decline was was disproportionately in catch and shoot threes. I'm looking at the numbers now. Games 1 and 2, they took 21 per game catch and shoot threes, which are the best threes. Games 3 and 4, they took 12.5. And that's all the secondary guys, right? Anunoby, Ibaka, Valanciunas even, not getting the easy open, and they're going to be open because nobody guards them. Not getting the looks that come from there's two on the ball, somebody's open. And I think you wrote it really well in your recap of Game 4, which is everyone focused on crunch time when they became the Raptors again. They became more or less what the Raptors spent an entire year trying not to be, stagnant, predictable, one-on-one basketball. But you wrote it in your recap, and it was in my notes too when I was watching. It started to gum up earlier in the game. It happened more extremely late, but just like they weren't playing with pace anymore. They weren't rushing the ball up the floor. They were kind of walking into some of their actions. Maybe their possessions like had one or two fewer actions. There was fewer second, third, swing kind of stuff. It's funny how it happens. I think it happened to Minnesota last night when the Rockets just started raining an avalanche of threes on them. It's happened to Oklahoma City. That's a different issue. That you just go through stretches where a switching defense and just sort of a run by the other team or a small crisis in confidence. It just kind of it just wasn't there for them, and it wasn't just in crunch time. I thought.
Yeah, there are two factors. I mean, one is, I hate mismatch basketball. And I think when you're facing a switching defense, as Toronto's been, you're tempted by it. You're lured into, hey, let's back it out, and rather than just kind of keeping within the flow of the offense. And there's a reason that the Raptors, now I'm looking at this now, they've scored 0.78 points on the 37 direct picks that have been covered by a Washington switch. I mean, that's obviously disaster. That's disaster. It's 37 possessions that you just you have to average up from there. The other is they started turning down shots. And I don't want to pick on DeLon Wright, who I'm a huge fan of, and I love what he provides in a second unit. I love that he's this additional, ball handler. But boy, there was a possession that broke my heart. And it was funny because they were still up at this point. It was the very beginning of the fourth quarter. And it was a gorgeous pick and roll with Lowry at his very best and Pascal Siakam. Washington had no answer for it. Oubre switched on, but at that point, Siakam was already ahead of Lawson, who just died on the screen. The pocket pass was perfect, and Siakam knows exactly where DeLon Wright is, which is by himself, nobody within 6 city blocks on the left side, setting up a chaise lounge. He was so open and had so much time. Siakam's pass was perfect, and DeLon just gets it and freezes. And it happened again with Wright about 2 minutes later, where he was the kick out. And what does he do rather than shoot? He decides he's going to back it out against Otto Porter, and then try. Dude, that is not your function in the offense, especially when Kyle Lowry's on the floor with you. Your function is to shoot that ball when you get it, which is exactly how they manufactured all those points in the first game. And to a lesser extent, the second game, but they stopped shooting it. It was an issue. It was an issue after the game. It was an issue. It probably they have guys who did not shoot the ball, and so to some extent, you start to understand why DeMar at a certain point in the fourth quarter just says, "Oh, screw it." It's now up to me to freelance. But I think you're right, and it's one of the things switching does. I just think it all of a sudden you start playing mismatch basketball. And it's just, and it's so funny. And no matter how many stats you see, and there are moments when you just abuse a smaller defender. Or if you're a quick guard, you just have to put a guy on roller skates. I get that there are opportunities to exploit when you're facing mismatches, but I just think of any team that aspires to be a continuity offense, you get lured into that. And there's stats that show this, like watching teams try to post up Chris Paul because he's 6'1" or whatever he is. And do you know the numbers of Chris Paul defending big men in the post are, what those big men get out of those possessions? 0.85. It is such a fool's gold playing mismatch basketball, particularly when you're the Toronto Raptors. And they didn't do it so much, but there were instances where they did. It just broke off from their offense, especially when you're the Raptors, and there's always this dark sense of we can go back to the dark side and become this ISO pounding team, even though we've had such great success as a ball-moving continuity light offense. And I do think the switching in some ways baited them into that.
DeRozan against the switch in this series when he shoots or when he passes to somebody who shoots, and I watched them all. It's mostly him shooting or turning the ball over or whatever. 0.77 points per possession on 18 plays, exactly. And that includes the 4-point play he had on Mike Scott last game. When they switch and someone else shoots, the numbers are like way better. Like when they switch and more stuff happens and then someone else shoots, the numbers are way like 1.4, 1.3. It's too small of a sample to read anything into it. But to your point, I think there's a fine line between like, okay, so mismatch basketball, it's ugly, but if the mismatch is quick ball handler versus big guy he can beat off the dribble, if you go fast, that's a mismatch. Like if you go fast and you use that as a vehicle to get to the rim and or kick out the ball to shooters, that's fine. If you just sort of herky jerk your way into a floater, that's where you get into trouble. And I think like I'd like to see him, and particularly Lowry, and he's better at this than DeMar. If he gets any switches like that, I just want to see him go. Just go, and he's done it a couple times, but just go.
Yeah, no, again, that's an important distinction, and I think it would be curious to see. I'd love if, with the optical track, and we have it, like with each passing second after a switch, what is the offense's efficiency, right? Because I sense that you're right, which is, when acting decisively against a switch, offenses can just exploit, especially small on big. But with every time, backing out, the sort of now everybody else on the defense knows exactly what's going to happen. Now, essentially, you're allowing the defense to reset within the confines of a half-court possession. I'd love to see those numbers if anybody has them. Like the law of diminishing returns on mismatch basketball if you don't act right away.
Well, I guarantee you those numbers exist. Some team has them. Some team has a system for calculating the second-by-second expected points per possession, but unfortunately, we do not have that. Hey listeners, you know me, I'm very protective of my time, which is why I always got a little stressed out whenever I had to buy tickets for somebody who was coming to visit the city. It was like an ordeal. Have I checked this website, that website? There's a million secondary market websites. What if I'm getting a bad deal? How do I know if I'm getting the best deal? All of a sudden 2 hours have gone by that I don't have. But there's a better way, and as you all know, that way is SeatGeek. It's the smartest and easiest way to get tickets to any kind of live event, a sporting event. The NBA playoffs are happening now. A Broadway show, they help me get tickets to Hamilton, a comedy show, a concert, whatever. It's designed to make your life easier. It streamlines that whole process, collates all of those different sites into one place, saves you time and money. It's very easy to tell. It has a nice little color-coded system that tells you if you're getting a good deal, a bad deal, where the seat is. Every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. You should make it your go-to app for buying any kind of type of ticket. Best of all, my listeners get $20 off their first SeatGeek purchase. That can be a decent chunk of a Broadway show or a sporting event of some kind. All you need to do, download the SeatGeek app, enter promo code LOWE, LOWE, my last name and the name of this podcast, promo code LOWE, and bam, $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase.
Here's a little insider travel secret. There are tons of empty hotel rooms out there just waiting to be booked. That's why there's Hotel Tonight. Hotel Tonight partners with awesome hotels to help them fill their unsold rooms, which means you get incredible deals. And even though the name's Hotel Tonight, you can actually book up to a week in advance and up to 100 days in advance in top destinations. So download the Hotel Tonight app to start scoring better deals at better hotels now.
I know you said before you didn't want to give into the narrative of here come the Raptors, same old Raptors, uh-oh Raptors. But and I get what you're saying, but I do think what you just said is the crossover between the narrative and basketball. Like that's what happened.
Yeah, no, and that I'm cool with, right? Like I think I don't like mystical narratives. Like, oh, there's something ineffable and there's this curse or there's something in the water that prevents them from winning big games because they're the Raptors or they wear a certain. What
about the notion that they can feel the tension. The players can, when the fans get tense, the players can feel it. Windhorst was putting forth that argument yesterday. I want that to be true because you know what it feels like to be in an arena as a press person or a fan and feel.
Hey man, I grew up in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Talk to me about it. Like I get it. Like give me Braves, Yankees games and frigging,
Who's your all-time favorite? Who's your all-time favorite Brave?
My all-time favorite Brave? It's boring. because like it's Greg Maddux just because the whole Maddux epic, but I also loved Ron Gant. So I mean, Gant is in there.
Wow,
like, is right up. I was a big Ron Gant guy, like as a kid. That was my guy. But Maddux just because the whole craftsmanship of pitching, and like that doesn't surprise anybody that Greg Maddux is my favorite Brave, right? But also Chris Chambliss, and see, I have a very soft spot for the '82 team because that's the first team I ever really followed. So you had you had Bob Horner, you had Dale Murphy, you had Rafael Ramirez, Claudell Washington, Glenn Hubbard, whose beard predates James Harden by many years. Mad Al Hrabosky, the Mad Hungarian.
Sure, yeah.
Al Hrabosky, kind of talking to the ball. And then like Biff Pocoroba, which is a wonderful name when you're 9 years old, is Biff Pocoroba, the backup catcher. So I was a big Braves fan. But the point is, I can feel, watch me watch the Falcons Super Bowl against the Patriots, or I've been there, one stinking championship and all with all that talent across 3 sports. But so I just don't know. I mean, can Kyle Lowry feel it? I don't know, but I do think it does have validity as a narrative only insofar as they are fighting against this sort of ISO old Raptor style of basketball, right? And it's always a crutch, and if that is sort of their default, and they've sort of this recidivism or reversion, if you will. And so in that respect, same old Raptors, but it's only same old. If they lose playing an admirable, their new brand of basketball, like I don't think you can do that. If they lose playing circa 2015, 2016 Raptors basketball, okay, the narrative sticks. And really it becomes, and so I will say this about narrative. This is on DeMar DeRozan, right? Like he, to me, is the most elastic player on that team. Like Lowry is Lowry, and all the wonderful things that go with Lowry, and then some of the limitations. He's Kyle Lowry. JV has improved his game. I mean, Serge is sort of elastic because he was amazing in Game 1 and useless in Game 4. But really, this is about like DeMar DeRozan has like he's sort of the hero in the mythology play right now, right? Like, is it good DeMar or is it going to be bad DeMar? And his thing is, I just want to be aggressive, and I get that. Like, but there are modes of aggression that are useful and ones that are potentially self-destructive. And so to me, if you are going to play narrative on this series, it's like, can DeMar kind of be the shining knight who sort of, summons his best instincts and and even when he didn't have a statistically good game in Game 1, he sort of bought into the ethic and threes rained down on the streets of Toronto. And it was beautiful. And Game 2 was sort of this lovely hybrid where he didn't really score in the first quarter, and then just sort of as the pressure eased, he was selective and attacking, and then it was like Game 4 DeMar, which is like just one bad decision after another, getting in the air off an errant drive and missing a guy in the corner because he wasn't even looking, and just desperately trying to elevate the team with the best instinct. I mean, it's not like, I don't think DeMar's selfish. Like, I think he's not a guy with absolute confidence in his playmaking, unlike a lot of sort of ball-handling guards. But so I don't think he's a selfish player, but there are instincts of just the math works against him. And, at the end of the day, he's a slasher. In a game where slashing has to be more selective.
You brought up Ibaka. And to me, as much as the Wright passing up open threes, now Wright's an okay 3-point shooter. He's going to do that every once in a while. Just like Aminu will do it in Portland. He'll pass some up, and then for some reason he'll get feisty and take 3 or 4 in a row. Ibaka in the last 4 minutes of the game had one play where DeMar swung it to him on the wing, and there was one defender between him and DeLon Wright who was in the corner. And that defender was Otto Porter, and he stunted to where he just rotated to Ibaka. Like, DeLon Wright was wide open. It wasn't a stunt. It was a straight up like rotation, and no one rotated to DeLon Wright. And Ibaka just kind of froze with the ball and did nothing, and then reset it. And then about 30 seconds before or after that, I can't remember, it was a DeRozan Ibaka pick and roll that they did not switch. Ibaka slipped into open space, caught the ball at the foul line, literally was facing the side of the court where nobody was within 20 feet of DeLon Wright in the corner, and did not pass him the ball. And I thought, as much as DeMar doing what he did, which some of those shots he's going to make, like there are games where he's going to make those 12-foot floaters a lot more than he misses them. That was not one of those games. As much as that, Ibaka freezing in those moments and making the bad decision is the reversion of the Raptors offense that symbolizes the reversion of the Raptors offense to what it was before, because they have put so much work, and Serge has put so much work into not being the guy in Oklahoma City who couldn't make a decision with the ball. He drives so much more decisively. He's not a great passer, but he knows at least now where the next play is, and he makes it fast. And in those moments, now who knows, maybe Wright doesn't shoot those shots as you talked about, but in those moments he froze up and he made the wrong play, and it just killed possessions. And it was what I'm saying is it was essentially collective. And by the way, Did Dwayne say why Valanciunas didn't play at all? Did he play at all in the fourth quarter?
No,
Pirtle played the whole fourth quarter, and then Ibaka played center a little bit, right? I think.
You know what's funny? Valanciunas got into a little foul trouble, and then I think the game takes on a certain shape, and Siakam turned out to be extremely useful. He was the guy in a game where you needed better decision making. He was the best. He was the best decision-making big, and so that's interesting. And you're right, it was a collective effort. We could kind of catalog various errors. I mean, even Lowry had a couple. But what's interesting for Casey is, where does he go in terms of the big rotation? In addition, in a game that's going smaller, Washington is now going smaller because he's, at times he's going to want to use 4 perimeter guys. So, you've got 4 bigs, each with their own set of virtues. I mean, I love JB on the floor, and I think one of the reason I love JB on the floor is not just because, as you say, he's finishing everything, but he provides a little structure to the offense at a time where I think, he's the guy. He might not be the best decision maker of the 4, but I do feel like that starting unit, which crushed it the first 3 games, has a certain form, and the ball, and because it has a certain form and a certain familiarity, the ball tends to move as choreographed. And so at times when they do get into freelance mode, I almost kind of intuitively want to see the starters on the floor for them because I know, they're reliable actions. They're reliable sequences. These guys have played a ton of minutes together, and you're less inclined to break off of that because it is so familiar. Serge, for as bad as he was in Game 4, boy, he can do a lot for you. Defensively, offensively. He's a guy who he's been in big games if that's your thing. Yet Siakam just had some wonderful ancillary benefits and really direct ones too. I mean, again, I want him 5 possessions at a time on John Wall. It did disrupt him. Wall didn't get good offense out of those possessions. Small sample size, but hey, one of the things that Casey's doing is just saying we need to throw multiple defenders and multiple looks. And I think, by and large, it's been a B-plus sort of series against Wall. And then Pirtle has his own, assets. I mean, he makes good decisions. He is a good rebounder. And so I do think it's going to be interesting to see how he manages that rotation, if indeed there's going to be 2 guys on the floor at all, because I think there are going to be moments where one is advisable with kind of Miles, operating as the small ball 4. So especially when you want to get some stretch, when things do need to decongest. So that to me is another reason to watch the series if you're looking for one. It's just you're somebody who I think appreciates the sort of decision making that goes into which personnel we're going to use in which context to combat which developments.
I thought Valanciunas should have been on the floor in the fourth quarter. I mean, I love Pirtle. He can't stop fouling, and he has now the refs every time he moves a limb call a foul. I just thought Valanciunas deserved more minutes. He's shooting 71% for the playoffs. He's a good foul shooter. He's a good decision maker. He can shoot threes if he's open. I wanted him on the floor more, and the starters have been by far their best lineup so far in this series. Hey everyone, if you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard me talk about Hotel Tonight, which is the best way to book hotels on short notice, though not just on short notice. You can book hotels for next week, next month, next year. They handle everything in Hotel Tonight. But, a lot of us who travel a lot, we got to make snap decisions and book on short notice. And you assume all the good hotels are going to be booked, the cool hotels are going to be booked, or I'm going to get ripped off. And Hotel Tonight proves to you that that's not true. You can get a good room at a good hotel for a good price. It has good pictures of what the room looks like. It's a very easy to use app, and it hooks you up to good deals at good hotels at the last minute or not at the last minute. So download the Hotel Tonight app and actually just start looking around. Let's talk about the Wizards a little bit more. Wall, I mean, the best overall theme is that Wall looks like a star. And he's making star plays. Like now, his defense has been at times abysmal, at times engaged. It just really depends on the moment and the game. But there are some times where he's just sort of dying out there still. But he's making star plays on offense, and that long term is very encouraging given the worrisome knee issues he's had. He's had 29, 28, 27 on better than 50% shooting in his last 3 games. 14 assists, 15 assists, 9 assists for the series. Those are the 4 games.
Massive.
And it's funny. The Beal Wall thing is always interesting, right? Because Beal can do some stuff off the dribble, but not as much as Wall, and people don't guard John Wall when he doesn't have the ball, and John Wall doesn't move when he doesn't have the ball. So through almost no fault of Bradley Beal's, it just sometimes seems like it's hard to find the right balance. Like, you need to give Beal some touches. You need to give Beal some ownership of the offense, and a lot of times it works. And it's funny, his straight pick and rolls, Anunoby has no problem with, but once he starts doing that sort of give and go little dribble handoff dance he has with Gortat, or coming off screens off the ball, Anunoby's had problems tracking his change of directions and stuff. Beal has gotten loose a little bit.
Yeah, Anunoby is great at the point of attack, and again, law of diminishing returns as a defender. And this isn't, he's a rookie, right? And, so far
he's a rookie, and he's good, and he got hurt in the last game, and we haven't mentioned that Van Fleet is also hurt. So these are real issues. Yeah,
and I think it's funny. I thought they can compensate for Van Fleet. I think in terms of orderliness in the second unit, a lot of what we've seen, they just miss Van Fleet. And again, I don't want to pick on DeLon Wright. I mean, he's been wonderful, and but I just think the drop off in terms of quality. Again, we wanted to talk about let's go back to the Wizards, and I apologize to Wizards fans because I'm sort of the Raptors focused reporter, and you should read Ohm's work on the Wizards, which has been exceptional. But in some ways they are kind of Raptors-esque. I mean, what they have, is an incredible pick and roll attack with their 1 and their 5. Gortat it's very funny to listen to Dwayne Casey sort of continuing to send messages to New York about what Gortat's doing on the screen. But what did he say yesterday that was funny? He was like, yeah, it's a new way of screening or something to that effect. Which is just kind of euphemism for.
I think every postseason opponent of the Wizards has now registered this complaint. I don't think it's going to work.
No, it's second only to. I'd love to know. Maybe Kiki Vandeweghe on a given night would tell us sort of. I would like the league rankings, and that Steven Adams is first, and I know that. I would bet a significant amount of money that Steven Adams leads the league in calls to Kiki Vandeweghe. But I think Gortat would be top 3. That would be an interesting list. I would love that list. So at any rate, they are kind of Raptors-esque. I mean, it essentially is at heart a pick and roll attack with a secondary. I mean, obviously DeRozan's much better off the dribble, but I do think that, with Beal it is a balance, especially when Wall's being so completely effective off the dribble. But I think Wall's done a really nice job of servicing Beal, especially in 3 and 4. Like, I think the message was heard. In fact, coming out of Game 2, there was sort of this discontent where Beal had a meeting with Scott Brooks.
It's amazing. They lead the league in meetings too. The Wizards just can't go a week without some sort of crisis management meeting.
I could never work for the Wizards because I'm notoriously anti-meeting. So they have this meeting, and Beal's testimony is that Brooks apologized to him. Scotty comes back and says, well, it wasn't really an apology. It was kind of just a conversation. But whatever thing, I think one of the underrated successes Wall has had in this series is just, again, as you say, it's a give and take, and look, it's Wall's game to manage because the ball is in his hands. And I just think I love some of the, they gave Beal some pick and rolls, and he's just not a great pick and roll player, and they haven't gotten a lot of great offense out of it. But you run that second side dribble handoff with Otto, it crosses up a defense to the Raptors switch, and then, Beal just needs just a modicum of space, and he got some great looks out of it. And, they realize, like, hey, the pick and rolls at 25 feet aren't great for Beal, but you know what? You pick out for him at 33 feet, and all of a sudden, now he's in space, and it works, and he's a really, he's a threatening player, and with that sort of distance, as on the perimeter. I mean, he can stop, he can pop. He's not a terrible passer, so it is interesting to kind of watch Wall manage the distribution of shots? Otto's not well, and you can kind of tell between the guy suffered an ankle and a calf injury, I think, in the last 4 weeks. I think there was a lot of rumbling coming in too, like, we need Otto, and Otto's not giving us anything.
Right.
I'm talking about a fan base more than the team, I think, although possibly the team. And he had a couple nice shots that paced them in the third quarter that got them through that big run to cut into the deficit, but in Game 4. But, Otto hasn't been incredibly effective, but Mike Scott, though he plays a different position, has been sort of filling that vacuum as sort of the pressure valve.
I love the way they look when they play. I love the way they look when they play Scott and Gortat together.
Yes.
Because then you have a legit spread pick and roll around. All you need to do is run Wall, Gortat, pick and roll, and you have good shooter. Porter, Scott, Beal on the floor at the same time is there's without Markieff Morris there, and Markieff Morris does a lot of things well. There's not a shot at him, but that's a very simple blueprint to lots and lots of good shots.
Right. Morris is a small ball four with the quotation marks around him. Scott is a legitimate small ball four. Though he's not, defensively you give up a little bit. And it's always interesting to watch because, again, the Raptors have never been a team inclined. They've always been let them match us. Let's keep two bigs on the floor, and one of them can make really good decisions, and one of them always has a little stretch. So we're okay. The Siakam, I consider Siakam stretch adjacent. He's almost stretch.
I like that. What's less stretchy? What's less stretchy than elastic is too stretchy. What's a little bit stretchy but not so stretchy? And we have to think of
spandex.
Yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah, if Siakam is a spandex 4. Okay, I like that. We'll workshop.
It's one of those merino wool T-shirts, we'll
work. We've hit on a good linguistic thing to workshop.
Well, spandex. He's a spandex 4. A little bit of give there, but not.
Yeah. I don't know what you were talking. Oh, Mike Scott is a stretch 4. Yeah, I like. I like the way that's looked for them. And by the way, how predictable and hilarious is it that Ty Lawson has taken all of Satoransky's minutes? The coaches are just never going to trust Satoransky. It doesn't matter how well he plays. It doesn't matter that he can defend 3 positions and play with essentially Wall, Beal, both, either, whatever. They're just never going to trust him. Ty Lawson comes in, vet Ty Lawson, come on. He's made shots. I can't even argue with it. It's just it's predictable and hilarious.
Yeah, for those Ty Lawson, I think Ohm's got a nice takeout on Ty Lawson coming up in his sort of his odyssey to get from China to a Wizards practice in 28 hours. So I think that drops today or tomorrow. But I want to pitch Ohm on Ohm's piece on that because I got a chance to read the draft and it's very nice and So but it's funny. What do you think it is? Is it that contingency point guards just? Although, it's funny. I was about to say, there's certain guys, unless you want to, you're more inclined to go with the conventional point. But then again, the Raptors have been using DeLon Wright. So, but there's something about I love that Satoransky lineup, and thought it would be a nice way to kind of give Wall rest, keep some of the other starters on the floor. Maybe they'd go to that. They maybe swap in again, as you say, Scott for Morris in that unit. And the funny thing is, you learn about Satoransky is when he plays off the ball, he's not all that useful, and they're not going to give him the ball. And it's just a curious thing, but it's worked.
He shot 46% from 3 this year. Now, not very many attempts, but that was always the reason. That was always the reason why you wouldn't trust him, right? Is that he would miss open shots and nobody would guard him. And let's see, what's the total number of attempts? It's not a lot. It's 101 attempt, 47 of 101.
I take it back.
Free Tomas.
Yeah.
Any other Wizards? I like the way that they've looked when Wall has posted up, although the tracking data is not logging it as post-ups, they're logging it as isolations. I would call them post-ups. I've liked the way they've looked. They've gotten Gortat easy baskets when Toronto sends extra guy. And by the way, we laugh at Gortat and his age-appropriate haircut. Him getting into the series, he's had a very good last 2 games, 14 of 18 combined, 16 in one game, in game 3, 12 in game 4. That's a big part of why they won. Just to get something from him is a big part of why they won those games.
No, and if you, again, go look at the John Wall Gortat combination, again, I think in the half court it represents a good portion of their offense. And, and it's just given them a lot of great offense. And I agree with you. In fact, in some ways, I think Casey was always going to use multiple defenders, not multiple at the same time, but go to different guys to cover Wall. But I think watching Wall post up Lowry in Game 3 was sort of a certain alarm. Lowry's a wonderful defender, and for me has always been in contention for all defense when I'm making out that list. But that is a liability to size, and Wall Wall has the vision when posting Lowry up just to make plays. It completely compromises Toronto's desire not to send help ever. And I agree with you. And it's one reason I think you're not going to you'll see Lowry start out on Wall, but I do think he'll go to the bullpen much quicker. The Wiz seem to have found. I'm curious to see if they stick with the switch against Toronto and just try to lure them into sort of, mismatch basketball. I think that's sort of their existential. In some ways, it's funny. It always comes down to, in some respects, like when you want to talk about the strategic imperative of the series, is how do you defend the pick and roll against really good point guards? And there are two really good point guards in this series, and two really good secondary guards. Not to refer to DeRozan as secondary, but in terms of pick and roll, he is. Yeah. And that is. That is sort of the great strategic imperative. So much of each team's offense comes out of that. And it's such a large percentage of your grade as a defense is what do you do with those actions? I think Toronto's been slightly disappointing. And then they know it. I think, it's very hard to guard John Wall. And then the larger narrative is, one of the things Toronto's saying, Casey's saying is like, do we think the Wizards with a healthy John Wall are truly an 8th seed? And
I don't like that he keeps. I don't like that he keeps saying that. Like I feel like the Raptors care too much about who they play. Just play. You're the number 1 seed. Don't keep telling me how good the number 8 seed is, and they're not. It's like they didn't want to play Cleveland in the second round. Like they were a little dispirited that you're the number 1 seed. Act like the number 1 seed. I don't want to hear how good the number 8 seed is. That's great. You're right. When they're fully healthy, they're better than your average number 8 seed in the Eastern Conference, which is usually a pile of crap. But I just don't want to hear it anymore. You make a fascinating point. Just about basketball is fascinating. Just in so John Wall in this series, isolations are averaging 1.22 points per play. That's massive. Mm-hmm. And I think you've seen this. Who does this every playoffs? Is Jeff Teague, and he's done it in the Rockets series, which is probably going to be over soon. But sometimes the best, Jeff Teague has hurt Chris Paul just one-on-one. Just don't come up and set a screen for me, so we don't get into this switch, post up, try and enter the ball, morass of death. Just get out of my way, and I'm going to score. And he gets good looks out of it.
That was always the Derrick Rose in his time. Right?
Yeah, and obviously Houston's offense is just all about get James Harden a one-on-one matchup. It doesn't even have to be a good one, and let him cook for a while. And it works. Like the math says it works. The numbers say it works. And then you just get through these stretches where it's like you go a little overboard or you pick at the wrong matchups that aren't like I thought the first half last night in Minnesota, it's just like Harden would get Wiggins on him and just dance for 18 seconds and shoot a 3. And again, the math says that's a good shot. It's been a good shot all year. He missed 5 in a row, and by the 4th one, I was like, can you get Towns on you and go around him and pass to the other guy? It sapped. No one else was touching the ball. Nobody was moving. It was literally, it might as well have been me, you, and 2 other dudes at ESPN playing with Harden. And then they came out at halftime and pushed the pace and was like, okay, you can do your ISOs and pick and rolls. What we're going to do is put you in the corner, have you run off a screen from Chris, take a dribble handoff from Clint. Now you're moving when you get the ball, and all of a sudden they did that all the time, and they started to get much better shots. But the ISOs are a good shot. It's just basketball has this ineffable thing where the rhythm of a game just kind of changes, and you got to read it.
Right, and one thing. So I watched the first 3 quarters of that Houston game, it's funny because as much as I'm on the bandwagon for Houston as anybody else, it just offended my sensibilities that first quarter. I hated what Houston was doing. I hated it. I was like, this is terrible. And I was annoyed, and this is why you brought Chris Paul and Mike D'Antoni to the Houston Rockets to watch this crap. And it reminded me all the things aesthetically I never liked about James Harden, which of course I voted for him for MVP, emphatically had the ballot pretty much filled out by March 1st. So, so anybody who's a Harden guy, like, I'm there. I get it. Like, I voted for him. But it did offend me. And I wonder, it's funny because the isolation, as you say, is good math. But I always wonder if there is does its overuse, and we can never, this is so abstract, does the overuse actually hurt the other classifications of plays? Because the offense just gets, so when it is time to get back into continuity and to get back into multiple actions on multiple sides of the floor, it just doesn't flow as well. Like, is there a compounding effect that teams that use multiple actions, like, and the more you do it, the better stuff it yields? I mean, I don't know. And that was sort of my concern for Houston, which is, like, I know you're not going to ever be a pace-paced team because the personnel, like, I get it. But, man, you can't keep doing this, especially because it's a defense that when you get the Timberwolves moving, they're a mess. Like, if ever there's a team in the playoff field to force to make decisions defensively, like they actually have some decent isolation defenders in Minnesota. If you allow them to defend as isolation, they now are an average team. You allow them to defend as a team that has to make decisions defensively, they're absolutely screwed, which, again, as you say, the third quarter was just a testimony to that.
And then the third quarter was just an avalanche. Well, I would have loved to have been in the locker room at halftime and see what the locker room in Houston, the Houston locker room was like, because they came out. I mean, they just played differently. They played faster. Like Chris Paul would come in and get these like emphatic gang rebounds and like scream while he was doing it, and then get it and push it up. It was just a different team, and like that's the team that people think can actually compete with the Warriors. You're not going to come anyway. We're getting off track. Game 5 is tomorrow, I believe, at the Air Canada Center. You've got to go to the beautiful BioSteel Center. It's the BioSteel Center, right?
Yeah, I believe so, with an RE. I love RE.
But did you notice?
Thing. Actually, I was thinking about like writing my recaps with a little more, where I think, various words where we have Z's and they have S, and
see if you can slip in
defense with a C. Defense with a C. I've been thinking about maybe doing. Can I get it past the ESPN copy desk? If anybody in Bristol's listening, can I get that past the ESPN? A little Canadian spelling. It's just a more graceful, slightly francophonic way of writing English that I just so prefer. I'm
going to give you another one to try and get through. See if you can call CJ Miles CJ Kilometers with RES as Matt Devlin, I believe, nicknames. See if you can get that one through. Did you notice what's next door to the BioSteel Center where the Raptors practice?
Yeah, a Medieval Times.
Yeah, baby. Have you ever been into medieval? Have you ever been to Medieval Times?
When I was like a teenager, I went once, I think in Southern California, and I don't think they had them in Atlanta. But can I just give a quick testimonial? And I think you'll appreciate this. Like, to the city of Toronto.
Oh yeah.
Which, despite the crappy weather, has just been feeding me beautifully and treating me beautifully. And like, I love everything about the city. There was an off day after the Raptors won Game 2, and I walked like 4 miles all the way from like Upper Dundas. If I'm probably mispronouncing.
No, Dundas is correct. Good job. That's right.
Yeah, like through all these different neighborhoods, like stopped in some galleries. Like it was, and it wasn't even, the weather still stunk, but it was like it was at least the sleet had stopped. So it was 41 degrees, and I was just going to get outside, and because I'd been marooned in a hotel for 4 days. And it's just like I've had one great meal after another, like great rotis for like low cheap food. Great, like the Sixers, brilliant chef gave me a recommendation to a place called Canis, Canis, which one of these had a tasting menu only. But Toronto's pretty affordable right now, I think, for the American dollar, and like that was delicious. Like this is this is the truly most authentically cosmopolitan city in North America. I mean, like sort of the cultural tapestry, these great enclaves, like vibrant ethnic communities. Like it's just fantastic. And I wish this could be like July. And actually went running. I went running outside today finally, and it's just like this is just such a fantastic NBA city. And I'm having a blast. But
it's a great town. It's a great town.
I suspect I'll be back here for 7. Something tells me I've got 2 more days here after Game 5. I feel like this series is going 7, man.
Another chance to check out Medieval Times. My only time at Medieval Times, I was a high school teacher, and 7 or 8 of us teachers were selected to chaperone the band trip, which was in Florida, and our school was in New Jersey. So there was a 24-hour bus ride full of students, to Florida. And one of the off-night activities was we all went to Medieval Times. And going to Medieval Times with 60 high school kids is a nightmare, to the point that we had a brief discussion among the teachers of, okay, so the mugs at Medieval Times are not opaque. You can't see through them. Opaque is what you can't see through, right? They're opaque. They're like that what is that material that all the Game of Thrones is the kind of mugs you always see in the medieval, pewter. They're like pewter. Like, can we smuggle alcohol in and nobody will know? Like, that's even that discussion we should have all been fired for. That's my only experience at Medieval Times. All right, enjoy Toronto, Kevin. Your coverage in Ohms has been fantastic. I look forward to Game 5. Thank you for sparing a moment before Raptors practice.
Thank you very much.
I'm a one-trick pony. Literally. I show up at kids' parties and act cute. That's pretty much it. So excuse me for being bitter when Geico says not only could we save you money on car insurance, but we do more. Like give you 24/7 access online, over the phone, or even via our award-winning mobile app. Well, ooh la la. Aren't they multi-talented? Hey, I said organic carrots.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.